"Get your mop and your bucket and get out of my gym," he said, loud enough for every person on that floor to hear. "People like you don't belong in here." The man holding the mop didn't raise his voice. He didn't step back. He set the handle down slowly, the way you set down something you intend to pick back up. And he looked at his employer with the quiet, steady patience of a man who had been waiting a very long time for exactly this moment. He said, calmly, "All right, sir." Nobody in that gym moved. 22 people, on treadmills, on benches, gripping cable handles, all of them went still. The machines kept humming. Nobody said a word. His name was Cornelius James Washington. He was 61 years old. He had worked in that building for 11 years. And the man screaming at him in front of 24 witnesses had absolutely no idea who he was talking to. In about 45 minutes, 6 black SUVs were going to pull into the parking structure beneath that building. The men inside them were going to ride the elevator to the 43rd floor. And the moment they walked through that glass door, everything in this story was going to change forever. But before we get there, have you ever been looked at like you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to be, like your presence itself was an offense? Let me take you back 3 hours earlier. The morning Cornelius Washington arrived at Pinnacle Tower, the sky over downtown Atlanta was the color of a bruise healing. It was 6:14 in the morning. He parked his 2009 Ford Ranger in the employee structure on level B2, not because he had to, but because he always had. Habit is its own kind of dignity. He had a system, and the system worked. He pulled his lunch from behind the driver's seat, a brown paper bag, folded at the top the way his mother used to fold it, with a crease so sharp it looked pressed. Inside were 2 biscuits wrapped in foil, a boiled egg, and a small Ziploc bag of salt. Breakfast was eaten in the truck before the shift. Always, he didn't like to eat standing up. He said once that a man who eats on his feet is a man who doesn't believe he deserves to sit down, and he hadn't raised himself to think that way. He pulled on his gray work uniform, the one with the small golden name tag that said Cornelius in block letters. Nothing more. And he reached behind the seat one more time and retrieved the thing he never left home without. It was a leather card case, small enough to fit in a breast pocket, worn smooth at the corners from decades of handling. The leather was a deep reddish brown, almost the color of old mahogany. On the front, stamped in gold letters that had faded to a warm amber, were 3 initials, CJW. His daughter had given it to him the year he retired from the first part of his life. The year everything changed the first time. He carried it every day. Some mornings before he got out of the truck, he just held it for a moment. Not superstition, just continuity. He tucked it into the breast pocket of his uniform, buttoned the pocket closed, and went to work. Pinnacle Tower was a 47-floor glass and steel monument to itself in the Midtown corridor. It housed 3 law firms, a regional bank, a private equity group, and, on floors 38 through 43, the corporate headquarters of Argent Capital Management, one of the Southeast's largest privately held investment firms. The building had a lobby that cost more to maintain per month than most people made in a year. It had a concierge, a parking valet, a florist on retainer, and on the 39th floor, a private fitness center available to Argent employees, and by arrangement to a small number of building tenants who paid a separate membership fee. Cornelius had worked those floors for 11 years. He knew every hallway, every service closet, every loading schedule, every light fixture that needed watching. He knew which partners liked the hallways mopped at 6 a.m. before they arrived and which ones didn't care. He knew the gym floor needed attention on Monday mornings because nobody wiped down machines on Fridays. He was good at his job in the way that only people who genuinely don't resent it can be, thoroughly, quietly, without needing anyone to notice. He had a supervisor named Marcus, who had a supervisor named Delgado, who technically worked under the building's facilities contract. And then, above all of that, floating in the rarefied atmosphere of the top floors, like a man who had never once considered that gravity applied to him, was Bradford Ellison Holt III. Holt was 39 years old. He was the executive vice president of operations at Argent Capital, a title he had earned, as everyone in the building privately understood, by being the nephew of the firm's founder, Bradford Ellison Holt I, who had died 4 years ago and left a structural vacuum that Bradford III had slid into the way. Water finds the lowest point in a room. He was not incompetent. He was the particular kind of competent that looks like mastery to people who have only seen mediocrity. And he understood, in his bones, the machinery of power, who controlled access, who approved budgets, who decided which contractors stayed and which ones didn't get renewed. He wore custom suits. He drove a Porsche Cayenne. He had his name on a corner office and a reserved parking spot on level B1, one level above Cornelius's truck. He had fired 4 people in 11 months. He gave speeches at all-hands meetings about accountability and standards, and he used words like excellence and stewardship in ways that made the people who actually understood those words wince. He had never learned Cornelius's name. In 11 years of passing in hallways, of nodding good morning in the elevator lobby, of watching Cornelius arrive early every single day and leave after most of the white-collar staff had already gone, Holt had never once said the man's name. He called him Sport sometimes, or Chief, or just, hey, a small cruelty, the kind that accumulates. That Tuesday morning, Cornelius finished the east hallway on 39 and wheeled his cart toward the fitness center at 6:40. The gym opened at 7 for staff, but the cleaning window was 6 to 6:50. He'd done this 100 times. He pushed through the prop door, mop in hand, and began working the floor near the treadmill bank. He didn't hear Holt come in. Holt had arrived at the building at 6:30 that morning, early. For him, which usually meant something was wrong, or he was trying to demonstrate something. He was in his gym clothes, a fitted Lululemon quarter-zip, compression shorts, pristine white sneakers that had never seen outdoor pavement. He came through the gym door at 6:43 and stopped when he saw the mop. He stopped and he stared, and something moved across his face that had nothing to do with inconvenience and everything to do with a story he'd been telling himself about who belonged where. Hey, his voice came out hard and flat. What are you doing in here? Cornelius looked up. Morning, sir, finishing the floor. Be out of your way in about 10 minutes. You're not supposed to be in here during member hours. Member hours start at 7, sir. It's 6:44. Something shifted in Holt's face. The logic was correct and he didn't like it. I don't want you in here, he said. This is a member facility. Yes, sir. I'm aware of that. Then you should be aware that people like you, and there it was, the phrase. 3 words that carried 100 unspoken ones behind them. Don't just wander into member spaces. Cornelius held the mop handle. He said nothing yet. I want you out, Holt said louder now. Get your mop and your bucket and get out of my gym. People like you don't belong in here. And then, because the building's morning regulars had already begun filtering in, because it was 6:45 and the early risers came early, the door behind Holt opened, and then again and again, and 22 people found themselves holding water bottles and gym bags, watching a man in a gray uniform stand very still, while a man in a quarter-zip said things that no one in that room could pretend they hadn't heard. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Cornelius set the mop handle down. He looked at Bradford Holt with the expression of a man who has already decided how this ends. He reached into the breast pocket of his uniform. He unfolded the flap slowly. He removed the small leather card case, the one with CJ.W. in faded gold, and he held it for a moment in his hand. I'll need to show you something, he said, very quietly. He opened the case. What was inside it would have ended this story right there, but Holt didn't give him the chance. I don't want to see anything from you, Holt said, and he reached out, and with one motion he knocked the card case out of Cornelius's hand. It hit the rubberized gym floor and slid several feet. Spinning once, coming to rest near the base of a rowing machine, the leather flap fell open. Whatever was inside scattered. The room went absolutely airless. Cornelius looked at the card case on the floor. He looked at it for a long moment. His face was completely, unnervingly calm. You're fired, Holt said. Security will escort you out. Don't come back to this building. He turned and walked toward the treadmills. And Cornelius Washington knelt down very slowly and began picking up the contents of his card case, one by one, quietly, the way a man picks up something that matters to him. What Bradford Ellison Holt III did not know, what he couldn't have known, because he had never taken 30 seconds to learn the name of the man who kept his building clean, was what was inside that case. He didn't know what the initials CJW stood for beyond a first name and a last. He didn't know about the first part of Cornelius Washington's life, the part that had ended 11 years ago when he chose to walk away from something enormous, quietly, without announcement or ceremony. He didn't know about the membership card, and he had no way of knowing that in 42 minutes, the reason Cornelius carried that card would be sitting in a motorcade 2 miles away, checking his phone. But to understand all of that, you have to go back much further. You have to go back 61 years to a 2-bedroom house on Ashby Street, in the West End of Atlanta, where a woman named Loretta Mae Washington raised 2 children on a school teacher's salary and the absolute non-negotiable conviction that the measure of a person was not what they were given but what they built. Loretta Mae was the kind of woman churches name reading rooms after. She was small, precise, and so deeply certain of what was right that her certainty became a kind of gravity that everything around her organized itself according to. She taught 4th grade for 31 years. She kept a Bible on the kitchen table and another one by her bed, and she read from both every morning, not for performance, not for comfort in any soft sense, but because she believed, and had always believed, that the world ran on principles whether or not people acknowledged them, and she preferred to acknowledge them. She had a phrase she said to her children so often it became less a sentence and more a frequency, a hum you felt in the walls of that house. What you do in the dark is who you are in the light. Cornelius heard it first when he was 6 years old and had quietly eaten a neighbor's pie off the windowsill where it was cooling. He heard it when he was 12 and found a wallet in the school parking lot. He heard it when he was 17 and his high school football coach told him, quietly, after practice, in the way important things get said, that he had been noticed. He had been noticed by people who noticed things that mattered. Cornelius Washington was a football player. That is a sentence that does not carry enough weight in plain English, so let's be more specific. Cornelius Washington was the kind of football player that happens once in a generation, at a position, a linebacker so instinctively precise that coaches who had spent 30 years in the sport said they'd never seen anything like it. He saw plays before they developed. He read quarterbacks at the line of scrimmage the way other people read large print text. He had a lateral speed that made opponents feel personally betrayed by physics. He played at Morehouse on a full scholarship. He was drafted in the 2nd round by the Atlanta Falcons in 1985. He played 9 seasons. He made the Pro Bowl 3 times. He was, for a decade, one of the most respected defensive players in the NFC, and he did it with the same quality he brought to everything. Quietly, thoroughly, without needing the noise. He retired in 1994, not because he was forced out, not because the body had given up. He retired because Loretta Mae got sick, and she got sick the way some people do, suddenly, and then all at once, and Cornelius Washington, who had made enough money by then to chose to come home. He came home and he took care of his mother for the last 2 years of her life, and when she died, he sat at the kitchen table in the Ashby Street house for a very long time, and he thought about what she had taught him, and he decided he was done with the version of life that required a stadium. He gave a lot of the money away. Not all of it. He was practical, not theatrical, but a significant portion channeled into a foundation he set up quietly, without press, that funded scholarships for first-generation college students from West End Atlanta. He named it the Loretta Mae Washington Foundation. He hired a director to run it. He stayed off the letterhead. He took the janitorial job at Pinnacle Tower because a man he respected, a retired deacon from his mother's church, told him they were hiring and the benefits were solid. Cornelius was 50. He wanted steady work, human contact, and a reason to be useful every day. He took the job and he kept it well. And for 11 years he showed up at 6:14 in the morning and did his work and went home. He had never told his supervisors about any of it. He had never worn his past on his uniform. He had a business card from the foundation in his wallet, the standard one, but the leather card case, the one his daughter gave him, the one that held the other things. He kept that to himself. One of those things was a membership card, not the building's fitness center membership, something else. Go back, for a moment, to the morning of the incident. Go back to the gym floor. Watch the card when it falls from the case. Watch the corner of it, the one with the logo. You might recognize it, you might not, but you'll understand in a moment why Bradford Holt, if he had taken 30 seconds to look at what he knocked out of that man's hand, would have had a very different morning. The card was issued by the Collegiate Athletic Alumni Consortium, a private membership organization that operates 7 elite athletic facilities in major American cities, including one on the 4th floor of Pinnacle Tower. Not the Employee Fitness Center on 39. The other one. The one that didn't appear on the building directory. The one with its own private elevator access, its own service staff, its own front desk, its own rules. The CAC facility at Pinnacle Tower was not open to the public. It was not open to most Argent Capital employees. It was, by charter, open exclusively to 2 categories of member. Former professional athletes who had met the consortium's minimum career threshold, and individuals who had been nominated and approved by the consortium's board. Cornelius Washington had been a founding donor of the Atlanta COC chapter. He had a lifetime membership. His card was card number 7, out of 412. He had never used the fitness center on 39. He had his own gym. On the morning Bradford Holt fired him, Cornelius Washington had been on his way to the COC facility, not to clean it, but to use it. After finishing the 39th floor early, as he sometimes did on Tuesdays when the early session started at 7:15. He had stopped to finish the gym floor because it needed doing, and he was there. That was the kind of man he was. The card case held his COC membership card, a small photograph of his mother, and a folded note in her handwriting, creased and recreased from years of unfolding. The note said, in Loretta May's precise schoolteacher cursive, "What you do in the dark is who you are in the light." When Bradford Holt knocked the case out of his hand, the photograph of Loretta May slid under the rowing machine. Cornelius crawled to retrieve it. He held it for a moment, the way you hold something irreplaceable, and then he placed it back in the case, clicked the case closed, and stood up. He walked to the security desk and asked the morning guard, a young man named Terrence, who had always been decent to him, to call downstairs and have his cleaning cart retrieved. He signed the termination form that Holt had apparently already had drafted, which meant this had been planned, or at least fantasized about, for some time. He rode the elevator down to B2. He sat in his truck. He made one phone call. The man on the other end of that call was named Raymond Ossie. Raymond was 55 years old, had played defensive back for the Dallas Cowboys for 7 seasons, and was currently the chairman of the board of the Collegiate Athletic Alumni Consortium. He was also, as of approximately 14 months ago, a member of Argent Capital Management's board of directors. Cornelius explained what had happened. He did not dramatize it. He stated the facts the way Loretta May had taught him to state facts. Cleanly, in order, without embroidery. Raymond Ossie listened. He asked 3 questions. Then he said, "Don't go anywhere. I'm 20 minutes away." What Cornelius said next is the part of this story that makes people stop and think about what kind of man he actually was. He said, "Raymond, I just want it handled right. I'm not looking for theater." Raymond said, "Cornelius, trust me, he didn't call the press. He didn't call a lawyer immediately. He didn't post anything. He sat in his truck, ate the second biscuit from the brown paper bag, and waited. Remember that second biscuit. Remember what patience looks like when it belongs to a man who has earned it." Upstairs, Bradford Holt was on the treadmill, earbuds in, already thinking about something else. He had given instructions to HR to process the termination and update the janitorial contractor. He had sent a text to his assistant telling her to have the cleaning contract reviewed for performance violations that could be cited. He was already constructing the administrative scaffold around a decision he'd made in a fit of irritation, and it never once occurred to him that he might have made a mistake. It never once occurred to him to ask who Cornelius Washington actually was. At 8:47, the elevator on floor 39 opened. Raymond Ossie stepped out first. He was wearing a dark gray suit, no tie, and the kind of composure that comes from having played in 4 playoff games, under conditions that would have unmade lesser men. Behind him came 2 other men, Charles Fenton, Argent Capital's general counsel, who had been reached by phone 11 minutes earlier and had turned his car around on I-285, and a woman named Sylvia Park, who was Argent's chief people officer, and who had the particular expression of someone who had been woken up by a call she knew was going to ruin someone's week and not her own. Behind them were two more men in dark suits who did not introduce themselves. The six of them walked to the fitness center. Bradford Holt heard the door open. He pulled out one earbud. He saw Raymond Ossie. He stepped off the treadmill. "Raymond," he said, with the tone of a man performing casual, "what brings you in so early?" "Bradford," Raymond said, "I need you to come with me." Holt looked at the rest of the group. He saw his own general counsel. He saw his CPO. He saw the two men whose names he didn't know. Something began to drain from his face. "What's this about?" Raymond said. "You fired a man this morning, the janitor." The word came out of Holt like a habit. He was in a restricted member facility without authorization. "I had his name," Raymond said, quietly and clearly, in a voice that had called out defensive formations on Monday Night Football, is Cornelius James Washington. He is a 3-time Pro Bowl linebacker, a lifetime member of the Collegiate Athletic Alumni Consortium, and a man whose membership card, which you knocked out of his hand, is for a facility in this building that predates the fitness center you were standing in by 4 years. The room was very quiet. "He was not cleaning your gym," Raymond continued. "He had finished cleaning it, ahead of schedule, as a courtesy. He was on his way to his own facility." "His own facility, Bradford." Bradford Holt's face had gone from tan to the particular shade of white that is, not really white, but the absence of blood. "He was wearing a uniform," Holt said. "Yes," Raymond said. "He was. I didn't know." Raymond said, "You didn't ask." Charles Fenton stepped forward. He had a folder. He was not smiling. "Bradford, we need to discuss several things. The termination paperwork has already been flagged. There are at least 4 witnesses among the building staff who have given written accounts to HR in the last 40 minutes. We also have footage." Holt looked at the camera in the corner of the gym, the small black dome he had likely never thought about once. "I want you to understand something," Sylvia Park said. Her voice was measured, professional, the voice of someone who has practiced saying difficult things. "This morning's incident has triggered our discrimination and hostile work environment protocols. That process is now underway independently of anything else." Bradford Holt sat down on the bench of a weight machine. He sat down not because he chose to, but because the option of standing had apparently left him. 20 feet below, in the parking structure, Cornelius Washington's phone buzzed. It was a text from Raymond. "Come up, please." He finished his coffee. He'd gotten a cup from the lobby cart. Because he was decent like that, he didn't hold inconvenience against people. And he rode the elevator to 39. When the doors opened, he walked into a hallway that held, among others, the man who had fired him 2 hours earlier. Bradford Holt looked up. His face was doing things faces do when the story a person has been telling themselves is revealed, in real time, in front of witnesses, to have been completely wrong. Cornelius walked to the center of the room. He did not hurry. He looked at Holt with the same calm he had shown that morning, the same calm he had shown every morning for 11 years, and he said nothing for a moment. Raymond Ossie said, "Cornelius, I'm sorry this happened." Cornelius said, "Thank you, Raymond." Then he looked at Bradford Holt. He didn't look at him with anger. He looked at him the way his mother had looked at students who had disappointed her, not with contempt, but with the specific sorrow of someone who had expected better and been confirmed in a fear. He said, "I've worked in this building for 11 years. I've walked past you. I'd estimate 300 times I've said good morning to you. You never said my name. Not once." He paused. "That's not a legal matter. That's just something I wanted you to know." Bradford Holt opened his mouth. He closed it. Cornelius Washington turned and walked to the elevator. He pressed the button for the 4th floor. He went to his gym. He did 40 minutes on the rowing machine. Then he stretched. Then he showered in the Koch facility's locker room, which had mahogany panels and towels with the consortium's initials. Then he went home. What happened after he left that building would take months to fully resolve, but the outline was established within days. Bradford Holt did not survive the week. His termination was announced internally on Thursday afternoon. Not a resignation, a termination, which in corporate language carries a specific and irreversible weight. Charles Fenton had found, in reviewing the morning's events, that Holt had directed HR to draft the termination paperwork before the incident was even formally reported, meaning the firing had been prepared in advance, which transformed a moment of bias into what the lawyers called a premeditated adverse employment action with a discriminatory basis. The language was careful, the meaning was not. The facility contractor that employed Cornelius filed a wrongful termination claim on his behalf within 48 hours. Argent Capital's response, given the weight of the circumstantial and documentary evidence, was to settle the claim within 11 days. The settlement figure was not publicly disclosed, but people in the building who knew the numbers said it was significant. 4 other current and former employees of Argent Capital, emboldened by what they had seen, filed their own complaints with the EOC, citing a pattern of discriminatory conduct in Holt's division. 3 of those complaints included documented incidents that predated the gym incident by as much as 3 years. A woman named Diane Okafor, who had been passed over for a vice president promotion twice in 18 months, despite performance reviews that were, in Fenton's own words, unambiguously superior to the person who was promoted, filed a separate civil suit. That suit was settled 14 months later. The terms, again, were not disclosed, but Diane Okafor was subsequently appointed to a senior director position at a competing firm, and she gave an interview to a financial services trade publication in which she said, without using names, that sometimes it takes one person refusing to leave quietly for a whole building to stop pretending it doesn't have a problem. The gym footage was obtained by a journalist at an Atlanta business publication through a public records request related to the EOC filings. It aired on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, it was trending. The phrase "people like you" was in every headline. The CAC membership card became the image. The small leather case with CJW in faded gold, photographed on a white background, ran in 3 national publications. The membership card number 7, out of 412, appeared in the caption of one of them. The hashtag was "people like you." It ran for 8 days. Raymond Ossie gave one interview. He said, "Cornelius Washington served this city on a football field for 9 years, and he's been serving it quietly for 30 more. The only thing that changed this week is that someone made the mistake of thinking he had to explain himself." Cornelius gave no interviews. His foundation's director received, in the 3 weeks following the news coverage, 11 unsolicited major gifts totaling just over $2 million. A law firm in Atlanta, pro bono, updated the foundation's incorporation documents and expanded its scholarship program. 2 more cities expressed interest in opening chapters. The Loretta Mae Washington Foundation, which had operated in quiet anonymity since 1996, now had a waiting list of applicants. The director hired 2 program staff. The website, which had been a plain single page with a contact form, was rebuilt. It featured, at the bottom of the About page, one photograph. A woman, small and precise, standing in front of a school building with her hands folded and a look of absolute certainty on her face. Cornelius went back to work. Not at Pinnacle Tower. The janitorial contract there was under review, and he was not obligated to return, but at a community recreation center in West End, 4 blocks from the Ashby Street house where he had grown up. The center had been struggling with maintenance staff. He knew a man on the board. He offered to help. He showed up at 6:14. He ate breakfast in his truck. He carried the leather card case in his breast pocket. 1 year after the morning in the gym, the Collegiate Athletic Alumni Consortium held its annual dinner in Atlanta. It was a black tie event held in a ballroom downtown, attended by former players, civic leaders, and the kind of people who do their most important work without needing anyone to see them do it. The keynote was given by a former NFL commissioner. There were awards. At the end of the evening, Raymond Ossie took the microphone and announced that the CAKE's new community partnership initiative, a program connecting former professional athletes with youth mentorship organizations in underserved communities, would be named after its founding donor, the Cornelius James Washington Community Legacy Program. When they said the name, Cornelius was already standing because the man next to him had nudged him and said, "Get up." He stood. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked at the room. He said, "My mother would have been embarrassed by this. She would have said the work is the thing, not the name on it. She was right, but I'll take it." The room laughed. Then the room stood up. He sat down quickly. He was not a man for sustained applause. He found it embarrassing in the way only people who know what they've done find it embarrassing, not from false modesty, but from the knowledge that the actual thing was done in private and the attention is a translation that always loses something. Afterward, at the table, his daughter reached across and squeezed his hand. She was wearing their mother's gold brooch, the one Loretta May wore to every graduation, every first day of school, every significant moment. His daughter had inherited it. She wore it the way she wore everything important, quietly, and because it meant something. Cornelius looked at the brooch. He thought about the leather case. He reached into his jacket and took it out, as he did sometimes, and held it for a moment. His daughter said, "You're not going to open it and make me cry, are you?" He said, "No, I just wanted to know it was there." He put it back. He buttoned the pocket. He drank his water. The ballroom was full of people laughing and talking, and doing the work of being in community with one another. A trumpet player near the stage was playing something warm and unhurried. The evening was long and the room was lit gold, and outside the Atlanta night was everything it always was. Complicated and beautiful and full of people doing things in the dark that would one day be who they were in the light. If this story stayed with you, if you felt something when he knelt down to pick up that photograph, please take a second and like this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you're new here, and hit the bell so you don't miss what comes next. And tell me this, have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who had already decided what you were? Leave it in the comments. I read them. Here's what really gets me, though. Here's the part I keep coming back to. Bradford Holt had 300 chances, 300 mornings in that building, 300 moments in that elevator lobby, 300 opportunities to say a name he never bothered to learn. And it wasn't malice, exactly, or not only malice. It was indifference. It was the decision, made a long time ago and never revisited, that some people don't require your attention, that some people are background, that some people, as he put it, don't belong. And Cornelius Washington, who had played in front of 60,000 people, who had a card numbered 7 in a room of 400, who had quietly funded the education of more than 200 young people from his mother's neighborhood, showed up every single morning in a gray uniform and said good morning to a man who wouldn't say his name back. He showed up. He did the work. He carried his mother in his breast pocket, and he did not explain himself to anyone who hadn't earned the explanation. That's not long-suffering. That's not patience as weakness. That is the particular strength of a person who knows exactly who they are and has decided that other people's ignorance is not an emergency. My question for you is this. Have you ever had something that felt like the CJW on that leather case? Something that was yours, something true about who you were, that the world kept looking past. Something you carried quietly, waiting not for permission, but just for the moment to be right. Tell me about it below, because I think a lot of people like this have a card case in their pocket. I think a lot of people are wearing a uniform that doesn't tell the whole story. And I think Cornelius Washington would want you to know the work you do when no one is watching is exactly the work that matters most. What you do in the dark is who you are in the light.